Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into the grittiest corners of World War II. Imagine yourself shoved through a gate of barbed wire, a stiff breeze cutting through your ragged uniform, the acrid smell of dust and unwashed bodies clinging to the air. The guard tower looms, its shadow stretching over the compound like some impatient sundial. You've been captured, processed, and now you stand blinking at a new reality, a prisoner of war camp run by the Americans. This isn't the brutal Siberian gulag you might have feared. But don't get too comfortable, because, in its own way, this place has surprises that'll make you question what you thought you knew about human endurance. And yes, spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these little bedtime journeys travel across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice, after the clang of the gate shuts behind you, isn't the food, or the dogs, or even the barked orders of the guards. It's the orderliness. The barracks stretch in neat rows. The fences are taut, freshly strung. The paths are worn but clean, as if someone had actually taken a broom to them. You shuffle forward with the others, boots dragging in the dirt. And already the comparison digs at you. The Americans live like this, while you, well, let's just say your socks haven't been dry since the Solomon Islands. The air smells odd too. Not just sweat, not just the faint staleness of bodies confined together. There's a whiff of soap, actual soap. You frown, rubbing grime from your cheek, and glance at your fellow prisoners. They wrinkle their noses as well. Someone mutters under their breath, and you catch the word, kusis melibut. The tone isn't disgust at filth, it's confusion. You're surrounded by men who smell. Clean. A guard ambles past, his rifle slung casually, as though you aren't worth more than a glance. His boots are polished, his shirt pressed. He smells faintly of pine, or something close to it. You wonder if that's the forest clinging to him. But no. You realize it's manufactured, deliberate. You remember how in your unit, washing was more of a lucky accident than a rule. Rainstorms doubled as showers. Rivers, when you stumbled across them, became laundromats. Soap was rationed, if you had it at all, and used sparingly. Here, though, it feels like you've stumbled into a strange world, where even in war, cleanliness hasn't surrendered. You reach the barracks. They're wooden, plain, but not falling apart. Inside, bunks stack 3 high. There's a sour edge to the airmen crammed together, unwashed clothing. Breath in the night, but still you can't shake that other smell lingering in the background. Something medicinal, almost refreshing. Later, you'll learn it's disinfectant. They spray it down regularly, as if they actually care whether disease spreads among their prisoners. Imagine that. You drop your kit on the bunk. What's left of it, anyway. A blanket, thin but whole, a tin cup, a spoon. You sit, listening to the murmur of voices around you. Some men whisper about the rations. Others worry about interrogations. But what gnaws at you is that faint sound drifting in from somewhere nearby. Running water. Not the splash of a leaking pipe. Not the trickle of rain through tin roofing. Actual water. Constant, deliberate. It's a strange sensation, hearing abundance in captivity. At home, in Japan, the idea of a daily bath was sacred, but rationed hot water shared among family, reused until it cooled. Soldiers joked about the emperor's bathwater being recycled for the navy. Out here, you'd been lucky to dunk yourself once in weeks. And yet, here, in enemy hands, the sound of water runs steady. Mocking you with its constancy, you roll onto the thin mattress and stare up at the slats of the bunk above. Your thoughts drift. How is it possible the Americans fighting the same war, burning through supplies, bleeding resources, still manage this? Is it luxury or discipline? Some around you whisper about American wealth, about their factories churning endlessly, about supplies dropped from the sky. Maybe that's part of it, but even that doesn't explain this obsession with scrubbing themselves. Historians still argue whether it was culture, practicality, or just logistics. Did the Americans really believe cleanliness was next to godliness? Or was it simply good strategy? Disease wiped out more armies than bullets, after all. Napoleon feared typhus more than muskets. Maybe the Americans just understood that better. Or maybe they were simply spoiled. You can't decide. What you can decide is that this camp feels surreal. You're caged, yes, but in a cage that smells faintly of mint, toothpaste, and disinfectant. You're hungry, yes, but your captors walk by smelling of soap. And every night, as you drift off in the stifling bunk, that sound of running water in the distance reminds you of the strangest fact of captivity. The enemy showers more than you ever dreamed possible. Some prisoners laugh at the absurdity. One mutters that the Americans must be part fish, returning to water every day. Another jokes that if you stand close enough, maybe the soap smell will rub off and fool the guards into thinking you're one of them. It's a thin humor, born of envy, but it passes the time. As the weeks stretch, the routines etch themselves into you. Roll call, rations, work details, and always the reminder that while you fight for scraps of cleanliness, the Americans seem to consider it their birthright. You wonder if, one day, you'll be allowed closer to that water, if you'll be granted soap, or if you'll always be the outsider, peering in at a world that tyrannically feels more alien than any battlefield. The first time you really see them, see the Americans, not as distant figures in the watchtower, but as men close enough to study, you're struck by how bizarrely ordinary they look. You're used to soldiers with hollow cheeks, uniforms stiff with sweat and grime, helmets dented from months in the field. These men, their boots gleam, their hair is cropped evenly, their collars are open but crisp, like the war hasn't touched them at all. One of them leans against a post, while another makes a note on a clipboard. The pencil is sharp. The paper looks fresh. You catch yourself staring, not at the rifle slung over his shoulder, but at the way his skin is what's the word? Clean. You can't remember the last time you saw someone without a faint patina of dirt under their fingernails. A fellow prisoner beside you mutters, "They don't even look like soldiers." And you almost agree. They look more like men coming off a factory shift, or maybe clerks who stepped out of an office, as though the war is something they commute to and from. But the rifles, the bayonets, and the towers remind you quickly, no, this is still war. They're just fighting it differently. You notice how they walk, too confident, unhurried, the kind of gait you've seen only in officers back home. Even the privates strut as though they have nothing to fear. Maybe it's because they know the camp is secure. Or maybe it's because, unlike you, they're not covered in the stink of defeat. The sight gnaws at you. In your army, water was reserved for survival, not comfort. A canteen was rationed sip by sip, and washing was secondary to thirst. Yet here, you realize, these men must be bathing daily to look like that. Their skin glows faintly pink, the way it does after hot water has scrubbed it clean. You rub your own arms, rough with weeks of filth, and suddenly you feel smaller, lesser. Historians still argue whether American camps were truly comfortable by design, or if the contrast was just that Japanese soldiers came from a culture of wartime deprivation so severe that even modest conditions felt extravagant. Some scholars point to Red Cross inspections, which pressured the Americans to maintain standards. Others argue it was pure pragmatism. Healthy prisoners don't spread disease, and clean camps don't breed riots. But from where you stand, staring at a guard who looks like he's just stepped out of a barber's chair, it feels less like pragmatism and more like mockery. You remember a saying from training: a soldier's smell tells you his story. Yours tells of weeks without soap, nights in jungle swamps, and mornings where your only wash was rain dripping through a torn tent. Theirs tells a different story altogether, one of abundance. You wonder if they even know what it means to feel grime clinging to your skin until it becomes part of you. The real sting comes when you catch sight of the medics. They move through the compound briskly, clean white armbands standing out against fresh khaki. Their kits shine with polished buckles. The smell sharp, alcohol, soap, even something faintly minty follows them. You shift uncomfortably. In your own ranks, medics had stained bandages, reused tools, and hands that bore the smell of blood for days. Here, these men seem to have stepped straight from a hospital corridor. One evening, as the sun dips behind the barbed wire, you notice two guards chatting near the gate. One of them gestures toward the showers, laughs, and mimes scrubbing his arms. You don't understand the words, but the motion is unmistakable. Daily, they do this. Daily. It isn't rumor anymore. Every day, a prisoner whispers nearby, "Impossible." Another shakes his head, his voice tinged with disbelief, "A lie." But as the days pass, you see the evidence with your own eyes. Men stepping out of the bathhouse, hair damp, shirts freshly changed. You catch the whiff of soap drifting across the yard. It's undeniable. A quirky detail filters through the ranks. Someone swears the Americans even carry little cakes of soap in their pockets, trading them like cigarettes. You can't prove it, but you imagine a guard pulling one out casually, the way you'd pull a coin, and rubbing it between his hands just because he can dot. The idea is so foreign, it borders on comedy. At night, whispers ripple through the bunks. "Imagine carrying soap instead of bullets," someone jokes. "Perhaps they'll fight us with bubbles next time." The laughter is thin but real. Because what else can you do when your captor's greatest weapon seems to be their obsession with smelling nice? Still, beneath the humor, there's a gnawing discomfort. Cleanliness here isn't just hygiene, it's a symbol. A reminder that you are a prisoner, dirty and beaten, while your captors maintain routines so ordinary they feel like luxury. It's like being caged beside men who live in a different world entirely. And in a way, that's worse than hunger. The first time you really notice the sound, you're sitting outside the barracks, tin cup in hand, staring at the dust curling across the yard. It isn't the clang of boots or the bark of orders. It's subtler, steady. A hush of water, spilling, trickling, rushing in a way that makes your throat tighten with longing. You glance toward the low wooden building near the fence, and realize that's where the Americans vanish in small groups. Towels slung casually over their shoulders, the BATHHOUSE.U almost laugh at the absurdity. Here you are, counting crumbs of bread, scraping the bottom of your cup for the last taste of watery stew. And yet within earshot, there's a building dedicated to hot water, not just for drinking, not for cooking, just for washing. It feels like discovering a palace inside a prison. A fellow prisoner elbows you and mutters, "Listen to that." It's like a river, You nod, your imagination filling in the scene. Steam rising, soap foaming, bodies refreshed. You can almost smell it from here, the faint hint of pine or lavender drifting on the breeze. The envy cuts deep. Historians still puzzle over how the Americans managed it. Wartime camps demanded enormous supplies, food, fuel, guards, medicine, and yet many camps still managed to run functioning shower blocks. Was it military efficiency, industrial wealth, or simply the American obsession with sanitation drilled into every soldier from childhood? Some argue it was part of their culture. Public health campaigns in the 1920s and 30s had already made daily bathing a patriotic duty. Others claim it was propaganda in itself. A clean army is a modern army, a civilizing force. Whatever the reason, the result is undeniable. The Americans never abandoned their BATHOUSE. Meanwhile, you're handed your ration of water-a-dented tin cup, lukewarm, meant for drinking. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you splash a little on your face. Other times, you rub it on your hands and pretend it makes a difference. But deep down, you know it doesn't. Dirt is layered into your skin like a second uniform. Impossible to scrub away without soap and gallons of water. The bathhouse looms like a forbidden temple. Guards stride in and out, with towels wrapped casually around their necks, not even noticing how you stare. One evening, you catch sight of steam escaping from a small vent. It curls upward into the cool night air, and the sight makes your chest ache. You remember your mother boiling water back home, pouring it into a wooden tub. The entire family took turns, the water cooling with each body. Baths were sacred, rare, communal. And now, here you are, listening to your enemies steam themselves daily, casually, as if abundance were the most natural thing in the world. The contrast sparks whispers among the prisoners. Some grow angry. They mock us, showing off like this. Others grow wistful. Imagine every day. No lice, no rashes. A few even start to dream aloud. Perhaps one day they'll let us use it too. Those whispers are quickly shushed. Hope is dangerous in captivity. The quirky detail that sticks with you is this. One afternoon, you hear laughter from inside the bathhouse. Not just casual conversation, but the kind of laughter that echoes off tiled walls, carefree and rich. The sound is so alien in a prison camp that it jolts you. Laughter carried on steam, it feels almost like cruelty. Though you know they aren't thinking of you at all. A guard passing by notices your gaze fixed on the bathhouse and smirks. He taps his arm with 2 fingers, mimicking a scrubbing motion, and then shrugs as if to say, "What, don't you wash?" The gesture burns into your pride. Of course you wash, when you can. Of course you care. But here, you're trapped with nothing but dust and the faint taste of metal from your tin cup. At night, the sound lingers in your ears. The soft roar of water rushing through pipes becomes part of your dreams. Sometimes you imagine yourself slipping inside, just once, to stand under that stream and feel weeks of grime peel away. But the fantasy breaks when you wake in the cramped barracks, itching from sweat, skin sticking to the thin blanket. The water remains just out of reach, as untouchable as freedom itself. Steam curls into the twilight like a flag you can't salute. You're standing near the fence when the bathhouse door opens, and 3 Americans stroll out, shirts half-buttoned, hair damp and combed, as though they're preparing for a dance. Not another shift in a prisoner of war camp. One adjusts his belt while another laughs, flicking droplets from his hands. The third carries a little cake of soap, wrapped neatly in paper, as though it were a prized dessert saved for later. The smell hits you, warm air, wet wood, and that sharp, almost medicinal scent of soap. It cuts through the dust and sweat of the compound like a knife. Your throat clenches, not from thirst this time, but from sheer envy. You touch the rim of your own tin cup still dusty from yesterday's ration of barley, tea, and wonder how much water it would take to make even a fraction of that steam dot inside. You imagine the rows of stalls, wooden benches, slick with condensation, hot pipes humming, soldiers humming too, perhaps, the way men do when comfort is second nature. Some say there are actual showers with metal spouts. Others insist it's barrels of hot water tipped into troughs. Historians still debate the details. Were American POW camps really equipped with proper plumbing in the 1940s? Or were they improvising with makeshift boilers and buckets? The truth likely varies from camp to camp, but to you, watching steam billow from the roof vents, it doesn't matter. However they manage it, the result is the same. They bathe as if the war hasn't touched them. Meanwhile, your own routine couldn't be more different. Once a week, if you're lucky, you're given access to a single bucket of water in the corner of the yard. No soap, no steam, no privacy. You line up with dozens of others, take a scoop in your hands, splash it over your face and chest, and step aside. By the time the last man finishes, the water is murky, more mud than liquid. Someone always jokes that it's soup stock, but nobody laughs too loudly. You recall how back home, in villages, baths were shared too. A single tub, reheated as long as possible, each person soaking in turn until the water was cloudy with the day's grime, but there was still a sense of ritual, of care. Here, the bucket is stripped of dignity. It's a reminder of what you lack compared to the men steaming themselves just beyond reach. The quirky detail that strikes you most comes one afternoon when you overhear two guards chatting outside the bathhouse. One holds up a bar of soap and snaps it in half, tossing the spare piece to his comrade. They grin like children sharing candy. You can't help but stare, soap treated not as treasure, but as something to break apart, trade, even joke about. For you, a sliver of soap would mean weeks of relief. For them, it's casual currency. The cultural gulf feels wider than the barbed wire fence. You were taught that endurance, the ability to live with less, was the mark of discipline. You believed that a soldier's strength came from suffering. Yet here are your captors, scrubbing themselves daily, smelling of pine or mint, laughing in clouds of steam, and, somehow, they don't look weak. They look confident, sharp, ready. You wonder, uncomfortably, if cleanliness is its own kind of weapon. Historians note that American military planners genuinely believed hygiene was crucial for morale and combat readiness. Soldiers were drilled to shave, to shower, to wash their uniforms whenever possible. Disease prevention was the official reason, but perhaps it was also psychological. A clean soldier feels human even when surrounded by mud and blood. That logic filters down even here, to the prison guards who carry themselves like men untouchable. As you crawl into your bunk that night, you press your face into the blanket, trying to ignore the sour smell clinging to it. Outside, the bathhouse light flickers against the fence, and the faint hiss of pipes lingers in the air. You think of the steam, the soap, the warmth, and though you try to swallow it down, envy curls tighter in your chest than hunger ever could. Laundry day arrives, though not for you. You're bent over in the yard, hands on knees, after another dull round of labor, when your eyes catch something peculiar. Rows of uniforms flapping neatly on lines strung behind the guard quarters. Khaki shirts and trousers, all nearly identical, sway in the breeze like a synchronized parade, and they are clean. It's such an ordinary sight, but it knocks the breath out of you. Back in the jungle campaigns, your uniform had long ago stiffened into something between fabric and armor, salt-crusted with sweat, darkened with mud that never truly washed out. Lice nested in the seams, and you learned to ignore the itching as best you could. Washing a uniform meant dunking it in a stream when no one was firing at you, and even then, there was rarely soap. Here, though, the Americans treat laundry like a simple chore, not a luxury. You hear a guard joking with another as they pin shirts to the line. The fabric catches the sun, almost glowing in its brightness. The smell drifts faintly toward you. Soap, starch, fresh cotton. You lower your head, embarrassed by the sudden awareness of your own stench. Historians still argue about how the Americans managed this scale of sanitation. Did they have proper laundries in the camps? Some evidence suggests mechanical washers powered by generators. Others claim civilian women were hired from nearby towns to handle bulk loads. A few accounts insist soldiers themselves took turns scrubbing uniforms by hand in big communal tubs. The truth is probably a mix, depending on the camp. What matters to you, though, is the undeniable result, while you huddle in the same uniform until it practically fuses to your skin. Your captors rotate theirs as casually as if laundry were endless. The quirky rumor that circulates among the prisoners is that Americans actually own several sets of uniforms each. 3, 4. Someone whispers, eyes wide as though speaking of kings. Another swears he saw a guard change into fresh trousers in the middle of the day, as if one outfit wasn't enough. You can't be sure, but you've noticed how they never seem to wear the same stained clothes twice in a row. The difference is more than cosmetic. Clean uniforms mean fewer lice, fewer rashes, fewer infections. You watch the guards scratching only their heads in idle thought, not furiously clawing at their skin the way you and your bunkmates do. You start to realize how demoralizing this imbalance is. Each crisp shirt on the line is like a silent reminder they have abundance. You have scarcity. That night, in the barracks, someone jokes, perhaps they send their laundry home to mothers in America. The others chuckle softly, though it's more bitterness than humor. Another mutters, maybe their mothers are the machines. The banter fades quickly. Hunger and exhaustion always smother laughter here. But the thought lingers, these men are fighting the same war, and yet their relationship with dirt, sweat, and laundry is so different it feels like a cultural riddle. You roll onto your side, staring at your own sleeve, stiff as cardboard from dried sweat. You imagine dipping it in hot water, watching the stains bleed away. You imagine hanging it in sunlight, crisp and clean, smelling faintly of soap instead of rot. But those images fade, replaced by the reality of your current situation. One uniform, one blanket, and the endless itch of lice you'll never fully chase away. You don't notice it at first. It sneaks up on you the way hunger does, subtle, creeping, undeniable. One morning, as you stand in line for roll call, the guard nearest you shifts his weight, and the breeze carries something strange across the yard. Not sweat, not leather, not gun oil. Something lighter, sharper, almost sweet. You inhale again. Soap. The realization stings. You've grown used to the collective stench of your barrack sewer. Sweat, unwashed fabric, breath that tastes of thin gruel. But here stands a man who smells as though he's just stepped out of a bathhouse advertisement. Later, another guard passes by, and you catch a different note. Not just soap, but something faintly spicy. Aftershave, the sort of luxury you once saw in glossy shop windows in Tokyo. Never imagining anyone would waste it, on soldiers, your fellow prisoners, catch it too. Whispers ripple through the bunks. They put perfume on their faces. Another insists it's some kind of chemical disinfectant, meant to protect against lice. But no, the truth becomes clear as days pass. These men don't just wash, they scent themselves. As if war hasn't stripped them of the right to smell civilized. Historians point out that American soldiers often received hygiene kits from the Red Cross or home packages, soap, toothbrushes, even little bottles of cologne. Some argue it was morale. Others suggest it was propaganda, proof that the American fighting man could remain modern and clean no matter the mud he slogged through. There's debate about how widespread aftershave really was in frontline conditions. But in POW camps, guards often had steady supplies. To you, watching them walk past with a faint aura of civility, it feels like a different universe. Then there are the dogs. The camp keeps a few, lean and sharpened, their paws drumming against the earth as they patrol beside handlers. You notice something odd. They never seem distracted by their master's scent. Back home, dogs on the farm would sniff endlessly at sweat-stained clothing. Here, the animals seem calm, obedient, almost bored. One prisoner jokes that perhaps the soap disguises the men, keeping the dogs from catching any real scent. Another quips that maybe the dogs have simply grown tired of smelling peppermint. The quirky detail that makes you grin despite yourself comes one afternoon when a guard, freshly shaved, leans down to pat his dog. The animal sneezes violently, shaking its head. A few of you burst into quiet laughter until a rifle but slammed against the fence shuts you up. But the image lingers. Even the dog isn't sure what to make of all this soap. You start to wonder if cleanliness is more than comfort. Maybe it's armor. When you stink, you feel like a prisoner less than human, weighed down by filth you can't scrub off. When they shine, they feel untouchable, as if the grime of war can't touch them. And that gulf between your sweat and their aftershave becomes another invisible fence around you. That night, as you lie awake, the barracks suffocating with stale air, you catch yourself sniffing your own shirt. The smell is overwhelming. Mildew, dirt, human musk. You press your face into the thin pillow and close your eyes, imagining for just a moment that the faint tang of soap drifting in through the cracks belongs to you. The next surprise comes not from the smell of soap or the sight of steam, but from a glimpse of something small, white, and foamy. You're hauling a sack of supplies across the yard when a guard, leaning casually against a post, tilts his head back, spits, and then resumes, scrubbing his teeth with a little stick of bristles. A toothbrush. For a moment, you can't quite process it. Toothbrushes are children's toys, luxury items, not things soldiers haul into a war zone. But this American holds his with the same casual authority as his rifle. You slow your steps, staring, until the man notices and flashes a grin, his teeth unnervingly white, especially compared to the yellowed and chipped smiles you're used to. Soon you notice more of them doing it after meals, before bed, sometimes even in the morning sun. They gather in small groups, cups of water in hand, brushing as if it's as important as guard duty. Foam spatters the dirt, gleaming briefly before drying into chalky patches. The sight makes your mouth feel rough, your tongue thick. Historians note that by the 1940s, American public health campaigns had drilled dental hygiene into daily life. Toothbrushes were mass-produced, cheap, even included in Red Cross kits. Japanese soldiers, by contrast, often carried tooth powder, if they carried anything at all, and more often simply rinsed their mouths when water was available. The difference is stark. Some scholars argue this daily ritual gave Americans a psychological edge. Others dismiss it as mere habit. But, from your perspective, watching a guard spit minty foam onto the dirt, it feels like another mark of alien discipline. The quirky detail that spreads among the prisoners is that Americans brush not once but twice a day, sometimes more, morning and night, someone insists. Another swears he saw a guard brushing after lunch, too. Soon, it becomes a kind of bitter joke in the barracks. They brush so much. Soon their teeth will vanish. You laugh, though it catches in your throat, because deep down, you wonder if that's why their smiles seem so infuriatingly intact while your own gums ache in the night. You think back to your own childhood. Brushing wasn't ritual, it was occasional, if at all. Sometimes, your mother would hand you a cloth dipped in salt to rub across your teeth. Sometimes, you just rinsed with water. And in the army, dental care was a low priority compared to bullets and rice. Now, each flash of a white American grin feels like a personal insult. One evening, you watch a guard finish brushing, rinse his mouth, and then toss the remaining water casually onto the ground. You freeze. That much clean water, wasted on a gargle. You'd have savored every drop. The sight leaves you both envious and angry. You mutter to yourself, they drink soap while we drink dust. In the dim barracks later, a fellow prisoner jokes that if you stood close enough when the guards spat, maybe you could rinse your own teeth in the spray. The laughter is sharp, almost cruel, but it eases the sting for a moment. Still, as you lie awake, tongue tracing the edges of your teeth, you imagine the cool sting of mint paste and wonder if perhaps that ritual is one of the strangest luxuries of all. The bathhouse remains forbidden ground, but one day you get something closer a taste, or at least a parody, of cleanliness. It happens when a guard wheels out a dented metal pail, sets it down in the yard, and barks for the work detail to line up. You shuffle forward with the others, squinting into the glare, half hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, this is your chance. The bucket sloshes with cloudy water, the surface already scummed with soap from someone else's hand. You glance around, no stalls, no steam, no privacy, just open sky, dust, and a line of weary men. When your turn comes, you crouch, scoop a double handful, and slap it over your face. The shock is immediate. The water is cold, grimy, and gone before you've even taken a breath. Someone behind you mutters, "Next." And you step aside, dripping mud more than moisture. You can't help but laugh, bitterly. A luxury spa, this is not. It's a mockery compared to the tiled showers you know lie just yards away behind guarded doors. There, the Americans scrub themselves under warm streams. Here, you hunch over a communal pail, splashing yourself like a crow bathing in a puddle. Historians often note this sharp divide in POW camps. Official records list adequate washing facilities, but memoirs tell a different story. Prisoners, remembering single buckets for dozens, sometimes filled once a day, sometimes less. Some scholars argue this was deliberate, meant to weaken morale. Others suggest it was simply logistics, since supplies couldn't stretch to match the standards the guards enjoyed. Whatever the reason, the gulf between bucket and shower becomes one of the most vivid contrasts you carry. A quirky detail emerges in the barracks. One man claims he saw a guard complain about the temperature of his shower, stomping off to adjust the boiler. The story spreads, half true or not, and soon everyone is joking about it. Too hot for him, too cold for us, someone quips, earning a round of hollow chuckles. You imagine the guard fiddling with knobs like a spoiled child, while you make do with a freezing splash from a pail. The experience becomes a recurring ritual. Once a week, sometimes less, the bucket is rolled out. Each time you line up, scoop, splash, and pretend it makes a difference. The guards watch from a distance, their expressions unreadable, as though they know this parody of cleanliness only sharpens your envy. You find yourself daydreaming not of freedom, not of food, but of steam curling around your shoulders, of hot water pounding dirt from your skin. At night, you lie awake, scratching at your arms, wishing the itch could be rinsed away. The communal bucket lingers in your mind like a cruel joke, a reminder that you're allowed to see the outline of comfort, to hear the hiss of pipes and smell the soap butt, never to step fully into that world. Days blur into weeks, and you begin to notice a pattern so regular it becomes eerie. The Americans never skip their showers. Rain pelts the tin roofs, wind howls through the fences, storms turn the yard into a swampland. Still, at dusk, the guards march toward the bathhouse with towels draped over their shoulders. You watch them vanish through the door as though the weather doesn't exist, and minutes later, steam seeps from the vents. Just the same, it unsettles you. In your own army, weather dictated everything. If the skies opened, you huddled under canvas scraps. If the river froze, bathing ceased entirely. Here, though, the ritual persists without pause. It's as though cleanliness is not a convenience, but a commandment. One evening, a guard strides out of the bathhouse, shaking his head, droplets of rain mixing with droplets of shower water on his shoulders. He grins at his comrade and says something you can't catch, but the tone is unmistakable. Amusement at the absurdity of scrubbing himself during a storm. You stare, bewildered. Who bathes after being drenched by nature itself? Historians still argue about this phenomenon. Some describe American hygiene routines as cultural conditioning, rooted in decades of advertising and public health drives that equated bathing with modern identity. Others suggest it was psychological warfare in miniature. By keeping themselves spotless, guards reinforced their authority over prisoners who had no such option. And then there's the practical camp disease prevention, simple and effective. Whichever explanation you prefer, the fact remains, their showers became clockwork. Storm or shine, the quirky detail that sparks murmurs in the barracks comes from a rumor. Someone swears the Americans even kept shower rosters, written schedules pinned on the wall, making sure no man skipped his turn. It sounds like a joke too bureaucratic to believe, but it spreads like wildfire, because it fits the image you've already built in your head. Daily, relentless, inevitable. At night, lying on your bunk, you think about the contrast. Your own daily ritual has become scratching at lice, shaking dust from your blanket, and swishing a mouthful of stale water if you're lucky. Theirs is hot water, soap, a fresh towel, and the smug confidence of a man who knows tomorrow he'll smell the same. The envy gnaws at you so much that you start to mark time by their showers. The clang of the bathhouse door becomes your clock. The hiss of steam becomes your evening bell. And each time you hear it, you wonder, is this habit really keeping them cleaner, healthier, stronger, or is it simply a comfort they cling to, like a child with a bedtime story? You don't know, but the sound of running water, every single day without fail, becomes the strangest lullaby of your captivity. The first time you realize the showers aren't just daily but heated, something inside you twists. You're hauling a crate across the yard when a door swings open and a plume of steam billows out, white and thick, curling into the cold evening air. Not mist, not breath steam, hot water made visible. You stop mid-step, stunned. Back home, warmth was rationed. In villages, the bathwater was boiled once, then reused by the entire family until it cooled to the temperature of soup. In the army, hot water was a dream, saved for rare holidays or the miraculous discovery of a functional boiler. Here, though, the Americans pump it daily through pipes like it's nothing. You feel it as you edge closer to the fence, the faint, humid breath of warmth against your cheek. A guard emerges, shirt clinging to his back, his hair damp and slicked into place. He looks more like a man coming from a spa than a prison yard. You grit your teeth, torn between awe and fury. Historians still debate how camps managed to supply such luxuries in wartime. Some suggest nearby towns provided coal and fuel. Others argue American logistics were simply unmatched, their industrial machines so vast that even prisoners of war could glimpse abundance. There's a darker theory, too, that the steam was partly for show, a display meant to impress Red Cross inspectors and remind prisoners of their captors' superiority. The truth, as usual, probably lies somewhere in the middle. The quirky rumor spreading through the barracks is that Americans complain when the water isn't hot enough. One man swears he overheard a guard mutter angrily about lukewarm showers. The idea is so absurd it sparks laughter. Imagine, someone chuckles. A war fought over temperature settings. Another chimes in. Perhaps they'll surrender if the boiler breaks. Still, the laughter is brittle. Because deep down, you know what hot water means. Fewer colds, fewer rashes, better sleep, a body that feels human. You, meanwhile, curl under a thin blanket at night, shivering in damp clothes that never fully dry, as you scratch at your skin in the dark. You can't help imagining what it would feel like to stand under that stream, to let warmth seep into your bones, to peel away layers of grime and fatigue. The thought makes you ache more than hunger. Freedom seems distant, but hot water so close, so constant, feels like the truest symbol of captivity. After weeks of watching, listening, and smelling the routines of your captors, you begin to notice something subtler, the effect their cleanliness has on you. Not just your envy, but the way it seems to shape the whole atmosphere of the camp. The Americans move with an ease you don't quite understand. Their shoulders are straight, their steps firm, their faces freshly shaven and somehow brighter, as though war can't dull them. Meanwhile, you and your fellow prisoners drag yourselves from roll call to work detail with heavy limbs, itching from lice, wrapped in clothes that sagged with dirt. The contrast cuts deeper than any barbed wire. Historians argue about this psychological gap. Was hygiene truly a weapon, a hidden advantage? Some claim it kept Americans healthier and sharper, their morale intact even under stress. Others suggest the symbolism mattered more than the practicality. Clean soldiers looked invincible, and dirty prisoners felt broken. You can't decide which is true, but you feel its weight every time a guard passes smelling faintly of soap while you stink of sweat. One evening, as you sit on your bunk, scratching at your collar, you overhear two guards chatting outside. Their laughter carries into the barracks, easy and careless, as if the war were nothing more than a long camping trip. You realize then that the showers, the laundry, the toothbrushing, all of it aren't just about hygiene, they're about identity. These men believe they are still civilized, even here, even now, and in believing it, they make it true. The quirky rumor that stirs murmurs is that Americans think dirt is dangerous to the mind. They say if you don't wash, you go mad, one prisoner whispers. That's why they scrub so much. You're not sure if it's fact or fantasy, but the idea sticks with you. Could filth break the spirit as surely as hunger? Looking around at your gaunt bunkmates, their hollow eyes and slumped shoulders. You almost believe it. That night, lying awake, you think about the rituals of your captors. Each bar of soap, each steaming shower, is a quiet reminder that they control not just your body, but your sense of worth. They shine while you fade. They laugh while you itch. And the most haunting part is this. Maybe they're not just staying clean, they're staying sane. By now, the daily shock has turned into conversation among you and your fellow prisoners, at least. In the barracks, as you huddle together against the night chill, the topic circles back again and again. American obsession with bathing. At first, the talk is whispers of disbelief. Every day, someone mutters, shaking his head. Another insists it must be exaggeration, that no army could waste so much fuel and water on something so frivolous. But the evidence piles up, steam rising nightly, damp-haired guards strolling past, the unmistakable temps of soap on their skin. Denial slowly gives way to astonishment. You trade stories with others. One man swears he saw a guard using 2 towels at once, one for drying, one just for wrapping around his waist. Another recalls overhearing Americans joke about the brand of soap they preferred, as if such choices were even possible. You can't help but smile grimly at that. For you, soap is soap, or nothing. Historians still debate whether these cultural differences stemmed from wealth, habit, or philosophy. Japan valued communal baths, but not necessarily daily ones, especially in wartime, when resources were scarce. Americans, on the other hand, had been taught by health campaigns and advertising that a shower a day was as important as food. Some argue this was capitalism at work, soap companies pushing hygiene as morality. Others believe it was genuine public health policy linked to disease prevention. Whatever the truth, it creates a gulf wide enough to swallow your pride. The quirky exchange that cements it comes during a work detail. An American guard, noticing the prisoner's stares at the steaming bathhouse, grins and pantomimes scrubbing his armpits. Every day, he says, slowly, in heavily accented Japanese. The words ripple through the group like a shockwave. Some laugh nervously, others scowl. You yourself just lower your eyes, unsure whether to feel mocked or enlightened. Later, back in the barracks, the stories grow more animated. Men compare the soap smells they've noticed: pine, lemon, even something floral. One prisoner jokes that perhaps the Americans are secretly women in disguise, so concerned with perfumes and freshness. Another replies, "If so, I'd gladly trade uniforms." The laughter is thin, but it feels good to laugh at all. And yet, underneath the awe lingers. Cleanliness here isn't just habitats, ritual, culture, identity. And as you swap stories in the dark, it dawns on you. You aren't just prisoners of war. You are witnesses to a clash of worlds, where even the act of bathing becomes a battlefield of values. The longer captivity drags on, the more reactions splinter. Not everyone feels the same way about American showering rituals. Some of your fellow prisoners scoff, rolling their eyes whenever the bathhouse door opens. Soft, they mutter. Weak men who wash instead of fight. One particularly bitter sergeant swears the Americans are addicted, as helpless without soap as a smoker without tobacco. Others, though, can't hide their fascination. You notice small acts of mimicry, a prisoner wiping his face more carefully with his sleeve, another trying to comb dust-matted hair with his fingers. One even jokes about scrubbing his teeth with charcoal from the fire pit, the black grit clinging to his gums until he looks like a caricature. The barracks erupt in laughter, though beneath it simmers envy. Historians point out this divide in POW testimonies. Some Japanese soldiers viewed American hygiene as decadence, proof of a culture too soft for true endurance. Others secretly admired it, even adopting bits of the habit when given the chance. The debate continues. Was cleanliness a sign of discipline or indulgence? No one agrees. But living inside the camp, you can see both truths fighting in the same room. The quirky moment comes one afternoon, when a bucket of soapy water is left unattended near the guard quarters. A few brave prisoners sneak over, dipping cloth scraps, hurriedly wiping their faces and armpits. The sight is comical grown men, scrubbing furtively like children caught stealing sweets. One even hums as he rubs his cheeks, parodying the American's bathhouse laughter. For a few minutes, the yard fills with quiet giggles instead of groans. But when a guard approaches, the bucket is shoved aside, and the moment ends as quickly as it began. You feel torn. Part of you wants to resist, to mock the habit as weakness, to cling to the pride of endurance. Another part aches for the relief a simple wash could bring. The dirt on your skin feels heavier each day, pressing into your very sense of self. And so you teeter between ridicule and longing, caught in a battle not fought with guns, but with soap and shame. That night, lying in your bunk, you wonder, is it really weakness to crave cleanliness? Or is it strength to claim it no matter the circumstance? The Americans don't seem weaker for their rituals. If anything, they seem sharper, more alive. You drift into uneasy sleep, the question gnawing at you. What would you do if the bucket were left unguarded tomorrow? Captivity narrows your world into routines. Wake, line up, work, eat, sleep. Yet one ritual remains strange enough to pierce the monotony, writing letters home. Once a month, a Red Cross official arrives with stacks of flimsy paper, each sheet stamped and censored before it ever reaches your hands. The guards distribute them casually, as if handing out scraps. For you, though they're lifelines, you sit on the bunk stub, pencil trembling in your fingers. What do you write? That you are hungry, that your body aches from endless labor, that you dream of baths you'll never take. None of that will pass the censor's eye. You have to choose carefully, balancing truth with the illusion of endurance. Around you, men murmur their drafts. Some write to wives, others to parents. A few whisper prayers as they scribble. You, though, hesitate. How do you even begin to describe the strangest detail of your captivity that the Americans shower every single day? Historians still pore over these letters. Many survived, stored in archives, revealing odd glimpses of life behind wire. Some Japanese families read, baffled, as their sons described guards who smelled of soap or who brushed their teeth twice a day. Was it exaggeration? Propaganda? Even scholars argue. But for you, seated in the dim light of the barracks, it feels like the most surreal truth you could send home. Finally, you write, the enemy washes often. They waste water freely. You pause, pencil hovering. Will your family even believe it? In Japan, water and fuel are rationed so tightly that a weekly bath is luxury. To claim your captors bathe daily might sound like mockery or madness. The quirky moment comes when one prisoner, grinning mischievously, writes an entire letter devoted to soap. He describes brands, scents, even the way the guards lather their faces. When I return, he jokes aloud, I will smell like a cherry blossom. The barracks chuckle, but the laughter fades as reality sets in. The letter will be censored. The joke will never reach home. You fold your page carefully, sealing in its quiet astonishment. Somewhere across the ocean, your family may one day read it and shake their heads. Perhaps they will laugh. Perhaps they will cry. But you know one thing for certain: if they do read it, they will struggle to believe it, because even you, living it daily, still find it hard to believe. The day you finally leave the camp, thin, hollow-eyed, yet alive, the memory that clings most stubbornly isn't the hunger or the endless roll calls or even the barking of dogs. It's the showers, the daily hiss of pipes, the sight of steam, the smell of soap drifting across the yard. Of all the things captivity etched into your bones, that ritual of the Americans feels the most surreal. You walk past the bathhouse one last time as the gates swing open. The building looks ordinary, wooden walls weathered by seasons, but in your mind it's a temple of strangeness. You imagine the guards inside, laughing, scrubbing, rinsing as though war never touched them. And you know you'll carry that vision home like a riddle. How could an enemy so clean also be so relentless? Historians argue still. Was it abundance that allowed Americans to wash daily, or discipline, or culture? Some call it propaganda, a way to flaunt superiority. Others insist it was simple practicality, disease prevention, dressed up as ritual. The debate may never end, but for you, standing at the threshold of freedom, it hardly matters. What remains is the memory of two worlds colliding, one where survival meant filth and endurance, the other where even captivity carried the scent of pine soap. The quirky detail that makes you smirk comes from your last glance. A guard stepping from the bathhouse, hair dripping, whistling a tune off-key. His boots splash in a puddle, and you think, absurdly, that even the water seems to follow him out. Clinging to his heels like a loyal companion, you shoulder your bundle, step through the gate, and leave the camp behind. Yet even as distance swallows it, the strangeness remains. You've survived hunger, cold, and humiliation, but what you'll tell people years later, with a shake of your head, is this: the Americans showered every day. The wind down comes slowly, like slipping into warm water after a long march. The sounds of the camp recede, replaced by the hush of memory, the quiet drift of thought. You picture the rows of bunks fading into mist, the bathhouse steam dissolving into the evening sky. Your body, though weary, feels lighter now, as if each detail of the story has been set down, no longer carried. That the strange envy you felt becomes something gentler, almost tender. You realize the showers were not just symbols of what you lacked, but markers of resilience, proof that even in war, people cling to small rituals that remind them they are human. Perhaps, in a way, the Americans weren't mocking you at all. Perhaps they were simply protecting themselves from the same despair that gnawed at you. So, you let the memory soften. Imagine the steam as a blanket now, wrapping not around your captors but around you, warm and forgiving. Picture yourself stepping into it, just once, washing away the grime of hunger, the itch of lice, the sting of pride. Breathe in the faint scent of soap, and let it carry you, slowly, into rest. You're safe here, listening, far from the fences and the buckets, far from the rations and the roll calls. The war, for now, belongs to history. What remains is the quiet hum in your ears, the steady breath in your chest, and the assurance that the night will pass gently. So close your eyes, let the steam fade to mist, the mist to silence, and the silence to sleep. You've survived the story. Tomorrow waits. For now, rest. Sweet dreams.